But we have to talk about the book that we just got done with, because it did generate a lot of discussion. With even in the YouTube comments, I referred to a lot of your extended work as well, a lot of your interviews. We enjoyed reading the book, Why Should I Believe Christianity?, which is part of this larger series of books, these 10 big questions to ask. Could you tell us kind of why you wrote this book in particular, with this book in particular, and then why you spearheaded this 10-part series?
Well, that's there's a long story to tell, but I'll try and give the abbreviated version. So a number of years ago, actually too many years that I really want to think about, the publisher, Christian Focus, approached me and asked if I would be willing to serve as the co-editor, the series editor, for a series that would be called the Big Ten series. I'm not sure at what point that series title appeared, but the original conception was a series of books that would address some of the major questions or concerns that are raised by educated, thoughtful unbelievers, skeptics of the Christian faith. That would serve not only as books that could be given to an unbeliever to engage seriously with their doubts, with their critical questions, and would be accessible to people who aren't biblically literate and probably don't understand the Christian faith very well. So not going to assume a lot of background knowledge or biblical knowledge. But it would also serve as useful resources for Christians who want to just improve their, apologetic skills and have answers that they can give when these questions come up. And so I and the initial co-editor of the series did some sort of informal polling of unbelievers that we knew, thoughtful, serious-minded people, but not Christian believers, about what are the major questions or major objections you have. In short, you're not a Christian. Why not? What's stopping you becoming a Christian? What are some of the concerns you have? And of course, you got the problem of evil. You got issues to do with science. You got Christians are just badly behaved. They're just bad adverts for their faith. The question of hell, and on and on. And so we got an initial list of questions that we wanted these books to address. And we wanted to get people to write them who actually knew what they were talking about, had some expertise in that area, but also were able to communicate, because, of course, there are many people who are experts in their field, but they are, so massively brained that they can't communicate clearly to mere mortals like you and I. So we wanted to find authors who would fit that profile, who could make a rigorous argument, give intellectually respectable answers, but also speak the language that your average unbeliever, if there is such a thing, would be able to understand and appreciate. And we whittled down the initial list to 10 that we thought were worth focusing on. But one of the things that I realized early on in the series is that while most of the books were addressing a fairly narrow question and in a defensive mode. So, for example, how could there be an all-good, all-powerful God with so much evil and suffering in the world? That is posed as a particular objection to the Christian faith, and so the kind of apologetics that you need for that is what John Frame calls defensive apologetics. So someone makes an objection, you want to give an answer and explain why that's not a reason. That's actually not a good reason to reject the Christian faith. And most of the books in that series were going to fit that profile. They were going to be addressing an objection or criticism and giving a defense of Christianity in the face of that. And I thought that there would be a need for at least one book to make a more positive case for the Christian faith. Again, I'm appealing to John Frame's distinctions here. He distinguishes between proof, defense, and offense in apologetics. So proof is sort of making a positive case. Here are the positive reasons to believe the Christian faith. Defense is answering objections, and offense is going on the offensive against non-Christian systems of thought, whether secular or non-Christian religions. And I thought there needs to be at least one book in the series that is making a positive case for the Christian faith. It's not going to be comprehensive by any means, because one of the features of this book was that they had to be relatively short, less than a couple hundred pages, although I think maybe in the end my book went a little over that. But, the sort of book that someone's not going to dismiss and say, oh, I'm sorry, that's just too long, I don't have time to read that. But insofar as it's possible to make at least an introductory case, positive case for the Christian worldview, I wanted to see if that were possible. And I thought that's something I would like to do for myself. I would like to have a book that I could give to someone when they say, why should I believe this crazy religion of yours? Why, no one in our age today who's intellectually serious could believe these outlandish claims that Christians make, that the Bible makes. Well, I wanted to be able to say, no, here are the basic reasons why this worldview not only makes sense, but I suggest ultimately it's the only worldview that can make sense of the things that we take for granted in our day-to-day lives, whether that be human dignity or moral norms or our ability to know the truth, to have purpose in life and so forth. So I, being the editor, of course, I exercised my editorial privilege and recruited myself to write that book. But it wasn't quite that simple. I had to get other people to agree to it. But it was something that I thought I would like to do. It would be a nice challenge. There was no equivalent book that I could just point to and say, here's what I recommend. So I thought I would try to write it myself. And also, many of these books that make a case for the Christian faith typically follow a classical or evidentialist methodology, either explicitly or implicitly. And I wanted to do it in a way that I thought was more consistent with presuppositionalism, that didn't compromise the doctrine of Scripture, that didn't compromise the doctrine of God, that made a case in a integrated worldview fashion. And that's why in the book, and I bet you've discussed this in some of your episodes on this, that's why I actually lay out the Christian worldview in a summary form before I give any of the reasons for believing it. I think that the best way to defend the Christian worldview is, first of all, to explain what it really is and why it has this internal cohesion and coherence to it before you offer what might be regarded as external reasons or other grounds on which one might believe this worldview to be true.
Yeah, and when we were going through the book, what we thought was going to take one episode, because we know the Christian worldview, we know sin and resurrection and all that jazz. It took us 3 episodes. It's the most amount of episodes we've done on a chapter. Okay. But I think it's also because we love the subject so much, because it's the saving gospel of the Bible. So we had a lot of fun talking about this, and we also enjoyed how you start the book saying, "Believe true things. It's good to believe true things. Christianity is true. Therefore, believe Christianity." So we enjoyed that kind of in your face. Of course, but also good to state it. And in my in our positive review for the book that anybody can find on Goodreads, we post a lot of our reviews there. I say this is a book that you pick up off the shelf and hand to either a new believer or someone questioning. And it's really, especially that middle chapter of what are the kind of the major tenets of the Christian worldview. I mean, that middle chapter is one of the best ones that I've read on a book that I can give to somebody that's not, okay, let's talk about the book of Judges and go through, Deborah, which, I love Deborah too, but maybe less tent post and less stakes. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. That's very gratifying, because that was always the aim, to write a book that a Christian would feel comfortable, even enthusiastic about handing to an unbeliever and saying, here's a basic introduction and defense of the Christian faith. It's not going to be a conversation ender. It's going to be a conversation starter. Yeah. But I hope that minimally any non-Christian who reads this book will at least come away understanding what Christianity really is. They may not embrace it, but they hopefully won't have any excuse for not understanding what the core claims of the Christian faith really are.